This episode of The Envelope is brought to you by Max Originals, hacks for your consideration.
Then there's people that didn't like the series, like every series, and that's okay. You know, it's TV, just don't watch it. And there's some people that hated the series for the wrong reasons. I wouldn't engage with that discourse because I feel those attacks were not even meant for me, really.
Welcome back. We're here with another episode of the Envelope podcast. My name's Yvonne Villarreal.
I'm Mark Olson.
My name is Sean Finney, and you all had two great conversations today. Mark, go first.
Yeah, I talked to Naomi Watts for the show Feud, Capote versus the Swans. Naomi Watts is getting incredible reviews for her performance as Babe Paley. So the show is about the fallout from the publication of Truman Capote's short story, Le Cote Basque, 1965, which was a thinly veiled portrait of this group of New York City socialites, including Babe Paley. And the show kind of gets into her backstory, her life with her husband. She has dealing with cancer. And so really it's just like a sort of fascinating look at society and this very specific kind of moment in time. And yes, Yvonne, I did ask Naomi if she thinks that Truman Capote's Swans compare to the Real Housewives.
Capote is our Andy Cohen, you know? Come on. And thank you for your service, Mark. I really appreciate it.
And who did you speak to?
Well, I spoke with Issa López, who conceived this season of True Detective, which was titled Night Country. And, you know, you both remember True Detective. I mean, it premiered 10 years ago to, critical and cultural acclaim with Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. All right. But yeah, through the seasons, we've had other folks, shuffle in like Rachel McAdams, Taylor Kitsch, Mahershala Ali, Vince Vaughn. This is the first season that isn't helmed by series creator Nick Pizzolatto, and it stars Jodie Foster as chief of police and Callie Reese as a state trooper. And it's set, in Alaska just before darkness descends on the area. It's a decidedly more female perspective than past seasons, and Issa and I discussed that a little bit.
Yeah, Issa was such an interesting choice to come into this. I mean, she'd made some genre films in Mexico, but essentially, really little known to a broader audience in America. And so I think it was so bold for the producers of the show to bring her on for such a big, part of the series.
Yeah, and she'll be back to helm the next season, which she sort of teased a little bit in our conversation.
I think the perspective is going to be interesting too with Nick gone, which makes it exciting and gets the people going.
Don't tell him that.
When we come back, we'll have Mark's interview with Naomi Watts.
For the Los Angeles Times and The Envelope, I'm Mark Olson, and I'm here today with Naomi Watts, star and executive producer on Feud, Capote versus the Swans. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
As we're recording this, it was just announced a couple days ago that you're going to be presenting at the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Award for Ms. Nicole Kidman. When you were just two young actresses in Australia, could you ever have imagined the paths that your careers would take?
100% no. Nick was already a standout and had done a little bit of work when I first met her, and was definitely on covers of magazines and stuff, so I believed it more possible for her. But for me, no, not at all. Far too of an outrageous dream. But once she came over to America and started working, it piqued my interest. I thought, oh wow, from the same place, the same age, with similar friends, we share a dream. Maybe it is just a little bit possible. It did make me feel a certain sense of inspiration and possibility.
And now to start talking about Feud, the group of women that the show is about, Babe Paley, who you play, but also CZ Guest, Lee Radziwill, Slim Keith. These women were described as socialites. They were influential in their own way. Is there a good contemporary analog for that? Is it fair to compare them to the Real Housewives or reality stars?
Gosh, it's a great question. I think they were one of a kind, unique set. But if there is no, I can't see it. I can see the temptation to jump to that. But to be fair, I don't know. I've never watched that show, so I'm probably the one person on the planet that has never watched it. Truly, although I know enough about it because it's so in the zeitgeist. But these women were actually doing their best to stay out of the press. And that was considered part of their superpower, their elegance, even though they probably enjoyed being the envy of many of their contemporaries. I think when I was starting to study Babe Paley, there was no footage available, no interviews. I didn't know the sound of her voice. I didn't know how she moved. I just saw beautiful photographs. That was sort of caught in between, or some, very posed, orchestrated pictures by high-level photographers. But that just sort of speaks to how much work it took to stay out of the pages of newspapers and stuff.
And so what do you do with that? Like, how do you go about sort of constructing your version of Babe?
Well, I read as much as I could, and there's, mercifully a whole lot available, not just the internet, but lots of books. And the Lawrence Lemur was our source material, which was fantastic. And, read about other, Bill Paley and all around her life. And it was quite a gargantuan life with, 2 sets of children and a career, 2 husbands, and then no career, and then being on the arm of Bill for such a long time. There was a lot to learn about her in all kinds of formats. But really what was on the page there that John Robbie Bates did so beautifully with Ryan and the world they created, we really just stuck to those scripts.
The show catches her at this moment in her life. She's been grappling with illness. It's the end of her life. And she seems to be in this really reflective mood, this sort of like, what is this all amounted to kind of way. Does that cause like that same kind of reflection for you? Like, how do you sort of like engage with a character that's in a moment like that?
We all start to get more like that when we see the larger amount of years behind us. That sort of naturally comes with mortality. And then facing it in a more direct way with her cancer diagnosis, I think probably created a more extreme version of that. And then at the end of her life, having to deal with so much betrayal, firstly from her husband with the infidelities, that I think she created such a thick skin over time, but then having that exposed by her best friend was just her undoing. How do you see the friendship, the relationship between Truman Capote and Babe, before he published Le Copas in 1965? Like, what was the appeal for her in the friendship with him? I mean, there was something about it that felt a little bit transactional, but also, perhaps that was there in the beginning. Like, what can you do? This fabulously artistic, clever, entertaining man who's, written gorgeous books before, and it's kind of in his heyday. And so them coming together like that at that point in time was fantastic. It was wonderful, and having his attention, and he's such a, like writers are the most wonderful conversationalists because they're always curious, they're always looking for stories, and so to be put in that kind of proximity where someone's just truly interested is tantalizing. It was fun for them, I think.
I found out Bill was still having his grotesque little affair with Happy Rockefeller.
He was still?
Now, in our home.
Go back. We're talking the governor's wildebeest wife here? That was still going on? I thought that was a one-time at best.
So did I. But he just wanted to keep screwing the governor's wife because he gets a kick out of it. And this is what is so humiliating.
That fat-ankled harridan.
Yes! It's so humiliating because I still do love him.
He lied to your face.
Yes,
And then they really did fall into this quite soulful, deep relationship. And there's something about the construct of a gay man and a straight woman that feels limitless in terms of creating a closeness. You know, there's no sexual tension. There's no sibling rivalry. There's no like female, like, oh, what have you done? And have you done this? And have you got that? And no comparative kind of jealousy or competitiveness. And they just got closer and closer and had a very successful friendship for, you know, nearly 2 decades. And so to have the rug pulled was just so upsetting for her to lose that. And again, the timing of it at that point in her life where she was really quite vulnerable, I think.
Because I think audiences coming to the show expect sort of Truman's story, but I think especially the way the story is framed to also tell so much of Babe's story, I think has been a real surprise for audiences.
Yeah. I mean, Babe, we know enough about her if you do a deep dive, but just like, I didn't know much about her. I mean, I wasn't brought up in America, but once I lived in New York, I heard more about her and, you know, read things. But yeah, fascinating that these women who are so powerful and the envy of so many, just by being on the arms of their husbands and by how they looked, how they presented, how they behaved. So yeah, I think that was an interesting reveal.
And then Babe is at such a difficult moment in her life in the story. And I'm so curious because for the past few years for you have seemed like a time when you've really kind of been opening up. It seemed like a really joyful time in your own life. You've been so public talking about your health journey, and then you recently were married. And what do you think it has meant to you for you to encounter this role at this time in your life?
It means so much. I have immense gratitude. I can't believe that, you know, I'm here talking to you and others at this time. It's been a while that I've been invited to that, you know, group again. It certainly had a great start with Mulholland Drive and then leading into, you know, box office hits with The Ring and King Kong and nominations from 21 Grams and The Impossible. But then it sort of went quiet, and not for lack of trying. Lots of effort, lots of hope and, you know, real consideration for how you pick material and everything, but that's just, my trajectory has not been like that. It's not even been like that. It's been sort of like this. And so to answer your question, how does it feel right now in this moment, at this point in my life? You know, I'm 55. It means a lot. I take it very seriously, and it's wonderful that Ryan Murphy took a chance on me and really believing in the female story. And, you know, it does speak to a time, and you mentioned my health journey. We can call it menopause, don't worry. I'm not going to be, I think the more the word is out there, the more it's normalized. You know, half the population will go into it, and we're living longer, so we need to investigate how to live and optimize our health. So Ryan Murphy, is exploring these characters of women at a certain age without fear or, you know, concern, and it's wonderful.
And it's always been one of the most exciting things to me about your career from when you first emerged with Mulholland Drive was the fact that you had been working for a few years before that, and there's always been this really exciting aspect to your career of like the way in which you emerged after seemingly sort of toiling for a while. And I'm interested to hear you say that, like, you feel like there have been some ups and downs and some sort of quiet moments.
That's not a feeling, that's a fact. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of it, I mean, there's some things that work into those factors, which is that I've really tried to shoot only in New York City because I have children, and my childhood was such that I moved around different schools a lot as a kid. The kids are also living in 2 different homes, so it's important that they have consistency as much as possible, and so I've made choices to not travel or take my kids with me or not leave them, except for during the summer, of course, which I can do. or for very short periods of time, like 10 days or something. Like I'm doing, oh, actually, I'm not even allowed to say that. Something next week for just 5 days in London, but that's manageable.
And what sort of keeps you going, like during those sort of like more,
Quiet. Yeah. I mean, I created a company just before COVID hit. We started working on that for menopausal women, skincare, and so Simple Solutions. Also, we offer an arm of education and community drivers so that a woman can feel well supported during that time. So that's been no easy task. That took a lot of time. And on top of which, I've been, just trying to stay in a good mood. And I love to work. And I think it's important people know how hard it is to make a successful piece of work. I've been doing it for decades now. I've done a large volume of work, and really only 5, 6, or maybe 8 of them have been really successful projects. And that just goes to show how hard it is to achieve something where everything lines up. And again, back to your earlier question, this is why I feel so grateful, because it's so rare. And Ryan created something where everything is synchronized, the level of writing, the level of filmmaking, the level of performances, and the reception of the audience. Like, and sometimes it can be a well-executed piece, but the audience feels like either ahead of it or behind it. It just isn't the right time. There's so many things that make for that perfect recipe, and this feels good.
And you are an executive producer on Feud, Capote versus Swans. And what makes you, you don't always act as a producer, but you've produced a number of things through your career. What makes you kind of decide, this is something where I want to take that extra step and be more involved?
I mean, in this case, in Ryan's world, it speaks more to the act of generosity. I would say he's very inclusive, and we'd done The Watcher before, and his world is so, it's such a well-oiled machine. He works with many of the same people across the board. So it's not like I'm there going, I think we should hire this person or that person. He certainly has consulted with me, and but it's usually the decision making is really, you can trust that it's in great hands with him. But there are other times where I've been an EP where I'm there from, the buying of the material or and developing it and all of that. So it's different every time.
Television, of course, is so much of sort of a writer's or showrunner's medium, but one of the things that I think really makes Capote versus Swans stand out is that so many of the episodes are directed by Gus Van Sant. I know you've worked with him before. What was that like returning to working with Gus, and what was sort of his contributions to this project? Because it does just have a feel to it that you can tell that it's like his touch.
Yeah, particularly the Cinema Verite episode, where it's all about the black and white ball. I loved when Ryan called to say it's going to be Gus directing it. I'd had a lovely, lovely experience working with him, though that film didn't necessarily reach the audiences in the right way. But I had such a great experience. So he's a very quiet, gentle man and not super verbose, but then suddenly he'll come up with a lot to say. And when he does say a lot, it's rooted in something very specific and important. In fact, the very beginning scene of that 3rd episode, I remember, he just was wanting to get it exactly right. It's that scene where we're in the art gallery and we're talking about Monet versus Manet. And I think I was doing it in a performative way because we were being filmed by the documentary cameras. So I was thinking of it in a different way, like who is this woman when there's a camera on her, and does it get extra special for the camera? And he just wanted to keep bringing me down, because to speak to the seriousness of how studied these women were, particularly Babe, in the subjects that they were meant to know about, and art was one of them. And so taking away the performative side of it and actually connecting with the truth of what one artist means versus another.
Babe Paley herself was in a car crash when she was young, so she wore false teeth
Yeah.
throughout her life. And as I understand it, you
Yeah.
had these false teeth made for the performance, and you know that changes the shape of your face. It changes how words feel in your mouth. Like in some ways, like on the one hand, for someone who's not an actor, that sounds like a really kind of relatively small decision. But as a performer, I'd imagine like it changes everything that you're
Yes.
doing. So how do you kind of grapple with that? Like how do you get used to like dealing with those things?
Well, a lot of practice and a lot of convincing as well, because Ryan wasn't really sure about prosthetics, and you know they can be an additional thing to just be in the way of an audience member. Like, do people get caught up on that and lose the story? And so you never want something to be distracting, but I was looking to try and make some kind of a transformation because I really looked nothing like Babe Paley. And so I went and tried them on, and I felt silly in them. They didn't feel comfortable. I couldn't speak well in them, and they felt too clunky in my mouth and aesthetically didn't look right. And so then we had them pull them back, and I think we pulled them back twice before. And I really did fight for them. I said, I think this will help convince us, because I've got crooked teeth and they're different sizes, and they were just perfect. And but I just had to learn how to speak. And even my dialect coach was really anti the idea for a while, because it was creating lisps in my mouth, which wasn't right. And then that's when people start getting stuck on that story rather than the actual story. So, but we got there. And what I didn't do in the end is wear the lower ones until the very end of her life, when she got sicker, and it helped create the shape of the face in a more extreme kind of gaunt way. So, yeah, while she was dying, felt right.
And now throughout the series, we often see Babe just getting ready. Like we get this sense of like how much work went into like her hair and her makeup and her clothes just every single day to just go pop down to Bergdorf's or to go to lunch with her friends. And like, what do those scenes kind of come to mean to you? Because it's something that sort of like comes up again and again through the series, and it provides this sort of really reflective moments for the character.
Yeah, so much effort, right? So much discipline, and it's very, I can relate in that when I come here to go on camera, I spent some time putting myself together with the hands of experts as well. In my own life, I never do that. I'm 5 minutes out the door. I can't imagine. But yeah, it just speaks to the level of perfection that she was constantly aiming for. And she had to have not a hair out of place, not ever say the wrong words. Everything was always about being a good member of society and pleasing everyone. And but I think that's, going back to Truman, why he was such a breath of fresh air. The irreverence and the silliness, the games, the outrageousness of him. I think, she was quite caught up by that sort of tightly wound aim for perfection, and really into his, lack of that, his freedom, his lust for life, and that was fascinating to her.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like it says so much about her that she planned her own funeral, and I can't quite decide for myself if I think that's like a great idea or if that seems sort of psychotic.
Kind of both, maybe. Yeah, she wanted it to be exactly right. Who was going to be there, how things would look, and yeah, quite sad though.
And then again, throughout the series, there are these lunch scenes where the women sort of gather, and just you as a group of actresses, yourself, Chloe Sevigny, Diane Lane, Callista Flockhart, it just like, what was it like shooting those scenes? Because there's something like sort of freewheeling and fun about them, but then also this is when they're sort of, those women in particular, I mean, they are literally the ladies who lunch. and they're sort of at both their best and their worst, like in those scenes.
Yeah, and sort of pushing around tiny bits of food and drinking till, it's dark outside, almost. Smoking, tons of smoking, gossiping, and telling each other how they should behave and what's what and who's who, and just speaking very much to that era. I feel like, there's things that still live on today in circles of friendships I see, but not to that level, no. It's but the way Gus filmed them was because we had endless scenes in Coke Bask, and it was such that we all were in the scene possibly at the same time, so the camera would just move around us, and which is a great way to work, actually. So you're not just sort of like relaxing and sitting with your own, taking off the tight clothing or whatever, and it's always possible that the camera will land on you at a certain time, and it kept us all in character all day long, basically, which was great, which is how it should be.
And then one sad note with the series is that your husband on the show, the character of Bill Paley, is played by Treat Williams, who died, unfortunately, before the series began to air. What has that done to you, especially, the later episodes of the series that are so tender between Babe and Bill? Is it difficult for you to watch those scenes now?
Very. We got very close during the filmmaking, and another one who hadn't had such great material for a long time, and he was commenting on that all the way through the film process, and he was just like, look at this writing, it's so great, I just love these words, and just adding to the tragedy that he didn't get to share this moment because of this senseless, tragic, sudden ending to his life. And he talked about his family all the time, always wanting to go back up to Vermont, which is where he lived on the weekends, and truly, truly tragic, because his work is, tragic for so many reasons, but his work in this is wonderful, and for him not to see the accolades it's very sad.
Well, Naomi, thank you so much for being here today. I just one last thing I want to be sure to ask you. You are also appearing in what is one of my most anticipated movies of the year, Audrey Dwan's Emmanuelle. I loved her film Happening so much.
Such a great film.
And this seems like such a really bold and sort of unusual choice for her as a follow-up. Is there anything that you can say about your role in the movie or about the film as well? Because I think people are like very excited to know what's going on with that movie.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of intrigue. I signed on because of Audrey and that brilliant piece of filmmaking. And, Naomi, a wonderful actress as well. It was like, wow, I remember this movie. And this is a bold idea, like you said. And I think for me, I've always felt like filmmaking is really the director's medium, and there are teachers. I want to find myself in the room with someone who's going to grow me as an artist, and that's why I wanted to do it. When I tell people that I'm in this movie, they go, Emmanuelle, what? I go, I'm not the lead. It's not, it's not me. I have a small storyline, but like I said, I just wanted to work with a brilliant artist, and so we'll see. I haven't seen the film yet. So.
Naomi Watts, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
After the break, we'll have Yvonne's interview with Issa Lopez.
Issa, thanks so much for joining me
My
today.
absolute pleasure.
So, True Detective Night Country is maybe your biggest, most high-profile project in the U.S. With some hindsight, how would you describe, or what strikes you about the whirlwind that entailed, both personally and professionally?
Once it started, it never stopped. It was a train. And the thing is, And I think every filmmaker will understand this. For every project you do make, there's 8, 9 that you don't make. And they move, some of them move pretty far along. So I was doing Night Country the way I've done many.
Okay.
And I have developed many for the U.S. in English. And you try to prevent yourself from pain. It still hurts like a motherfucker. You just have to pretend that this is the one that is going to be made, because in the small off chance that it gets made, it needs all the nutrients, which is why it hurts so much when it's not, because you have to act and believe that this is the one that is going to be made. This was the one that was made, but I didn't know that, so I went to it with the same passion and the same fear underneath, that it was also going to fall through the cracks, as so many projects do.
Right.
I think that's part of why I fearlessly wrote it in the Arctic. Because a little part of my brain didn't fully understand that I was going to actually shoot it, which was going to be very tough. So I just wrote it in the Arctic because it was cool, because it would be amazing.
Right.
But, it never stopped. And then we were waiting, doing nothing much. I had written it, I was done, waiting for the premiere and the show to drop. That's when you have a moment to go, oh, we are going to get this on air. And all of us crazy dreamers, and everybody came on the project dreaming of it, are going to see how the world likes it or not. So that's when the fear comes of, this is the first time that you can truly allow yourself to think about ratings, or think about audiences, or even think about reviews. Because before, you can't let that noise change the way you're telling a story. Now it's on.
Now it's
so
on.
You can't allow yourself to panic. And then the reviews started to fall and were great. And the ratings were great. And I think I still don't completely believe it, but it was beautiful.
What's the night before like when the first one drops? Is it sleepless night or a calm night?
No, it's a very calm night. Because at that point yes, of course there's trepidation, but there's nothing else you can do. There's nothing else you can do. It doesn't matter. I mean, other than lighting candles, as we do in Latino culture, and talking to your ancestors, but then you go to bed. That's it.
Well, this season highlights, the land back movement, the missing and, murdering of Indigenous people crisis, and, the high suicide rates for Native youth. Was that always the goal for you?
No. It's so interesting that once I decided that it was Alaska, because it was the Arctic and there were scientists, and it had to be America because it's True Detective. So it was Alaska. But I knew very little, as I think most of us do. So I took a deep dive. And the communities, I wanted it to be during the long night, which means that this happens north of the Arctic Circle. And those communities in Northwest Alaska are 60, 70, 80% in some cases made up of Inuit, Inupiaq in particular communities. And then these communities, specifically one of these cities, is very much affected by its relationship with the biggest mine in the northern Americas. And at the same time, the mine is what sustains the community. And it's a whole support system for education, for medicine, for everything. But it's a problem, and it's creating irreversible damage. So specifically for the Native community that has little access to a lot of the benefits of other parts of the world, but at the same time depend and culturally understands themselves by their relationship with nature and with hunting and with animals, it's a tremendous conundrum. And it's rich, rich soil to grow a story. So I needed to learn more. And I realized that my initial intention of having, of the two detectives, one white one and one Latina, was perhaps not the smartest thing, because that would mean that two outsiders come to solve the mystery. And we've seen that story told so many times. I'm done with it, and I think that the Native community is done with it. Certainly Alaskans are done with it. And the murder and missing Indigenous women movement I think, desperately needed Indigenous women to be the ones bringing an answer to that horrendous question.
Well, because this was happening during the pandemic and, there's tighter restrictions on travel at this time, your initial way of, researching the region maybe entailed you having to sort of rely on, I think it was TikTok videos, YouTube videos.
Yeah, I don't know what writers are going to do once that TikTok goes.
I know,
right?
But local radio stations and even, reality shows like Life Below Zero.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about what the details, how it helped you build the world.
Well, I was trapped, as we were all, and I was trapped in Los Angeles, and in a tiny rental in Venice, and it was hard to imagine that the long night of the Arctic, at the same time that it was the summer of our disaster here, and I couldn't travel to Alaska, and what I did in the meantime, because I knew that I had to be there and eat the food and know the people. Yeah. And that was a sine qua non. I wish I could have written the entire series while being there. But what I did in the meantime is, yes, I went on TikTok, I went on YouTube, and there's endless hours of videos that these people that inhabit these places make, I think in part because they're very bored during the winter. But they would, record themselves hunting, and they would record themselves going in the snowmobiles into the tundra and fishing, but also going to the supermarket and going to the mail office, and they would take themselves going to the airport. So that was perhaps even more interesting, So I started to incorporate all that. I was, while writing, listening to the local stations of Nome, Katsibio, of Utqiagvik, which is Barrow, and then and watching a fabulous show that I discovered called Alaska Troopers, which was, not all of the episodes take part in the Northwest, but it was so interesting. There is particularly one trooper that is Native and a woman, and she was a massive inspiration for the show. But then, the moment that I could jump on a plane, I went to Alaska, and I went into the police stations, but I also jumped myself on the snowmobiles to go on the ocean, and I went to their kitchens when they were making seal, and they would dress their salads with seal oil.
And you don't eat meat.
I don't eat meat.
So talk about the decision to go that extra step.
I think that you need to understand that if you want to understand a culture, you need to eat their food with them. And me as a Mexican, it would be like, dude, you're not going to understand who we are if you don't eat some pastors, and if you don't eat some dulce de leche, if you don't eat some pastel de tres leches. And so as a sign of respect, and they would have caribou too, and seal meat, and I find very lovely both caribou and seals. But I also have masses of respect for a culture that for millennia have had this respectful relationship with animals.
Right.
In their interaction and in the way they consume them. It's very different than the industrial way that we do. So yes, I ate with them, and I enjoyed more caribou than seal, I will say. But it was so much fun and so much joy to talk to them about how they understand the relationship with the West, because it's by far the latest Native culture to make contact. That only happened fully in the 60s.
Wow.
So they're the closest, I think, still to their own roots.
How did they receive you? Were they skeptical? Or?
They were so loving. And they were so excited about this story. And they not only received me, but they, work with me in the episodes, in reading every line of dialogue and saying, we would eat this is not what we would say. If she says this is how we would answer. This is a subject matter that it's better that you don't mess with it, know, or you need to talk about this.
Right.
But then they wanted to be in the show. So I brought them in the show. And the very same family that fed me, the patriarch of the family is a pastor, and he came and he played Oliver Tagak in the show. And the clothes are the clothes of his ancestors.
Wow.
So, and they would cook the food in the funeral scene. That's their food, their ingredients, their cooking. And the music is their music.
Wow.
And their voices are their voices. So they were so full of joy. And perhaps my greatest fear when making the show was that that community was not going to receive it and recognize themselves and have fun with it. They loved it. The series was beloved by the Paninuit community. And when I say Paninuit, this is a word that I took from Tanya Tagak, who is a massive rock star of that world, but also by the Native community around the U.S.
But this is also a deeply personal project. I know for you, you've talked before about losing your mother when you were 8.
Yes.
And, you know, the trauma from that, but also the goodness or the beauty that comes from a tragic circumstance like that is expressed in a lot of your work, not only Night Country, but Tigers Are Not Afraid. And I know you've talked about, like, when you were younger, horror films like Alien or The Shining were ways for you to escape what you were feeling at the time. And I'm curious what it's like now as an adult to sort of lean into that genre to process or unpack the things that you were maybe escaping when you were younger.
Completely. It's such a joy and a payoff that the things that separated me from the other kids, and I think this is something that every geek in the world understands, you know? The things that made me a different kid, the things that protected me from feeling lonely, you know, the idea that there's more to reality than what we can see and measure, allowed for me to try to pretend that maybe my mother wasn't gone, or maybe if she was gone was because something greater was at work.
Right.
And for some people, that's religion. For me, it was art, and it was geekdom, you know, and it was horror, and it was science fiction, and it was other versions of the world. And it was an escape. And because it was an escape, and my reality was harsh, and I was bullied, of course, the more harsh the environment, the more lonely, the more I would lose myself into these other worlds. And the fact that that thing that seemed like, at the time, like an escape, was eventually the very thing that allowed me to connect with the world.
It also is a way to connect with your mother, right? Because this was a genre that she loved.
Yes.
Even though she maybe didn't allow you to watch it at a young age.
Yeah.
But do you think about how maybe she would engage with your work if she were still here?
She would love this. She would absolutely love it, you know? So in a way, she loved to consume this. And, you know, I'm giving anyone that is here to take it, and turned out that it was a lot of people beautifully, the gift that I would have loved to have given my mother.
I know you're also a self-described Silence of the Lambs fan. And as we talked about earlier, you got Jodie Foster to play in your show. But there was initially, she had worries that, I don't know if this is the right fit for me. Like, she thought the character maybe should be a little more vulnerable at this, or not as vulnerable at this stage in her life, having lost a child. Talk to me about what those maybe, what you felt about her suggestions, and how do you know when it's something you want to implement into your work?
Well, it was so interesting because Jodie was saying, why is it that women often are offered roles that deal with the loss of a child, that are mothers that lost a child? And because, you know, men get different options with their characters. They can come from different places, and she's absolutely right. That said, I went away because I really needed to talk about loss in the show, because it's my personal theme. So I went away, and I came back, and I was like, Jodie, this first season of True Detective, guy lost her daughter, you know? And I went on a list, an endless list that went from True Detective to John Wick. It's a dog, but it's his wife. You know? To like, well, this happens throughout, it is a trope.
Yeah.
It is a trope because it works, because nobody can deny the power of that. That said, this is not what makes a character, and you're right about it. So she was suggesting that this is a woman that has been hardened by this event. And instead of being hurt, she's angry and she's hard and she's horrible.
If I can find where Annie died,
What
then
do you
I
think
can
you're gonna find? A signed confession on the wall?
murder weapon, DNA,
Even if
anything
you
that's
found
gonna
something,
help
he's
us
gonna block
find
it.
her.
No, you gotta stop now.
Stop? What are you even saying?
It ends here, right? It's over.
No. I'm gonna go talk to Otis. You can put it out on the map.
No.
And he can find it
You're
for
not,
us.
you're not gonna go to Otis because the lighthouse isn't gonna let you in after what you did. You just gotta, please, it's over.
You want me to make her into an asshole? And she was like, she laughed out loud and she said, yeah. And I was like, I would love to do that. I would love to do that. Number one, because I can't wait to see you play an absolute messy. Because Jodie is so perfect and so disciplined, but a messy asshole. I want to see that. Number two, because I also feel that a lot of great TV has done around the idea of men being horrendous people. And it has really created a tradition, these central characters that are hideous in their souls, or they become monsters.
Right.
And I wanted to talk about a woman who has become a little bit of a monster because of who she is and what she went through. A very important thing for the both of us is she started an asshole, and then this happened. So here we are.
What about Kaylee Reese? I mean, seeing what intrigued you or struck you about what she was able to unpack with Navarro, because she's also going through loss much differently.
Yeah.
But what did you enjoy about what she brought to that role?
What was amazing with Kaylee is a combination, and it's so unique, of power and presence. Because she's, I mean, just in the moment you see her, she just inhabits the screen, right? I was looking for a Native woman, and my casting director sent me one photograph of her. And I was like, that's it. That's Navarro.
Tell me again that you loved her.
I did.
You're not gonna stop me?
No.
So she brings automatically this power because she owns it, and this is who she is. But at the drop of a hat, and I knew this on the first tape, we did a test together, that if you help her, she could reach a profound emotion in a second and connect with grief in a second. So because I had the power and I had the emotion, all I had to construct was what was in the middle. And that was scary because those are the small textural scenes that make the life of a character. So I told her, like, this is gonna take work, it's gonna take rehearsal time, it's gonna take takes. And oftentimes, because you're working with Jodie Foster, Jodie's going to get it before I say action. And with you, we were going to be in take 15 and take 16, and it's going to be night, and it's going to be ice, and everybody's going to be staring at you. And she was like, I can do it. She's an athlete, you know, so they have this capacity of go again. And she could do it. And I was amazed of the truth that she brought to this character. Kaylee, like Navarro, is half native, half Cabo Verde, Cape Verde. So identity has always been a struggle, and she used that. It was beautiful to watch.
Typically, there are a group of writers working on a show. From its inception, you know, True Detective has had one writer and one director for a season. In your case, with this season, you wrote and directed every episode, which is a rarity for a women storyteller. Talk to me about why you took that approach.
It's unfair to say that I wrote it alone. I did write on every episode, no doubt. But the truth of the matter is I conceived the story, as I told you. I knew who had done it, and I didn't know how we were going to get there. I invented the two characters, the first episode, and then what me and my producers did is we found 4 incredible writers from very different backgrounds. We got together, because this was a lockdown, in a virtual room for 10 weeks only, just to map the series. And then just to say in episode 2, episode 3, all of the other 5 episodes. And then I gave each one of them, in one case 2, an episode to do the first draft. And they did. And then with that, I mean, I wrote 1 and 2, and then the others, 3, 4, and 5, they wrote, and 6 I wrote. And then I did a second, third, subsequent pass to all the episodes. And at a certain point, HBO suggested to bring someone just to spitball the final drafts of the series. And they offered to bring Chris Mundy, who is the writer of Ozark, and he's brilliant, and fun to work with, and very generous. So he came back, and with the written episodes and the notes from the studio, we together spitball how to turn it into the final version that you saw.
Okay.
And Chris did a pass on some of the episodes, and then I did the final ones and all the rewrites on set that were final, you know? So yes, I wrote every episode, but I had a lot of help.
Okay. We talked at the beginning about once you put it out there, you're sort of listening or hearing how people are receiving your work. And I wonder for you, because you did engage with the conversation, were you always like planning to do that? Or did you feel at a certain point, I need to weigh in here, or I need to talk about my perspective?
Well, you know, I think I've always been very impressed with the people I admire the most as storytellers of genre. Some of them are really, really good at interacting in social media. And one of them is Neil Gaiman, who's also a dear friend. And the other one is Guillermo del Toro. So I've always find it beautiful how patient and how, as long as you can answer a question, you know, that makes sense and is respectfully placed, you can answer a question. You know, you're not going to tell them who the killer is because they have to watch that.
Right.
But if they go like, why is there no breath in every scene? And you would go like, listen, I was in the Arctic for 10 months. There's times that you see your breath, and there's many, many times you don't. It depends on the amount of humidity in the air. So that's the truth and the reality, you know? So sometimes there's breath, and sometimes there's not. And sometimes we are shooting outside, and there is no breath. We're not going to put breath where there is no breath.
Right.
So you answer those questions. Or when they were like, why did Annie? And then you go like, this I can tell you. You know, honestly, you can figure it out too. But it's so much fun because people are watching and they're loving it and they're enjoying it, you know, and it's so much, there's so much satisfaction in the fact that people care that much.
Yeah.
Now, like always, the internet is the internet, and there's always trolls.
Yeah.
And there is a strong section of the core hardcore fans of the first season. There's people that, most people love the series and it hit really nicely. Then there's people that didn't like the series, like every series, and that's okay. You know, it's TV. Just don't watch it. And there's some people that hated the series for the wrong reasons. I wouldn't engage with that discourse because I feel those attacks were not even meant for me, really. What was happening is their lives were changing. You know, Barbie is the most successful movie in cinema very recently when the show dropped. Taylor Swift is taking over the Super Bowl. They were not even on the know that March Madness was going to change so deeply, and that Beyoncé Knowles was going to release an album that was going to completely take over country music. And, you know, the world is changing for that core audience. And True Detective is sacred to them because it's TV for them is Sopranos. and Breaking Bad, and True Detective. And it's 3 very, very good shows, very, very male shows.
Yeah.
And I took one of them, and me, a woman, and I made it female. And I made it multicolor. And I made it about things that they don't want to hear. And they were mad. And I was not going to engage with that.
Well, we all know that one of those people that was mad was Nick Pizzolatto, who is the creator of the series. And I know you've talked about it and you've shared that you understand as a writer being possessive of your work. But I'm curious, when a fellow writer is making comments in such a public way, especially as you're, preparing to work on the new season, how do you keep that from infiltrating you in terms of self-doubt, or, how do you not let it affect you?
Self-doubt was never like, listen, I if someone gives me self-doubt, that's me. And I'm so much better than that, let me tell you. But I think we all have that covered. I found it saddening because, no, I wouldn't have liked anything more than he being excited and celebrated it. The truth of the matter is, I can't imagine something as wonderful as having created as a story, a tone, so powerful that after creating more than 30 episodes of it, it's still alive and people want more. And then another filmmaker with a completely different vision and a different voice, but that loves that flavor, does their version. That's nirvana. You made it, man. Yeah. That's the next level. And me, myself, I'm so proud to have been able to revive it and to make that season the most successful of all the seasons before, which opens the possibility of having a 5th one and receiving the 5th one. And I'm loving the 5th one. And then after that, it will be the turn of another filmmaker. And I can't wait to see what a very, very different person and a different artist is going to bring into it. How exciting. I can't wait for that. So, hard to understand.
Well, as you said, the show will be coming back for a 5th season with you at the helm. Do you feel like you're off to the races with this story?
I am writing like a crazy person.
Is it connected in any way or completely?
It happens in the same universe because that's the whole point. That's what I put the spiral and because it's the same world, right? There's elements. Let's just say that. But it is the same world, though it's a very different story in a very different place with very different characters.
Okay. Are you close to finishing, or where are you at in the process?
I am not I'm not at the beginning. I will say you that.
Okay.
I'm beyond the beginning. Okay. That's all I can say.
Okay. Are you already thinking of who you want to play these characters?
I am thinking about it.
Okay. I know you won't tell me more, Issa.
I won't.
But I'm very excited, and congratulations on the season and the success of the season. It was great speaking with you.
Same. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching and listening. Guys, this is our last episode. We somehow have made it again.
I know.
This is our last episode until nominations.
In July.
So it's all year long here.
Did you bring your blanket? Because we're sleeping here until
Sleeping
then.
over, brought my blanket, brought my food,
Okay.
snacks. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we hope you stick around and come back and join us. In the meantime, please subscribe wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts.